right. Welcome to another edition of Grown Folks Business on a Thursday evening. Glad to see some familiar faces as always, and glad to get a drop in that we get sometimes. And Jared, and good to see you, bro. Glad to share the time. Lisa, as always, good to see you. Greg and Julia, Bob, Danya, thanks for doing what you do. Um, Last week we had a pretty good show that I thought. Carry some weight in terms of what we try to do in this space, and it's about community, it's about growth, whether it be personal or shared growth. So I think it was a continued conversation last week also, if I'm not mistaken. It was the state of you, how useful are our feelings. So uh, we're at a new place today. um, I think I was probably encouraged to take this direction after the first show, and Lisa wasn't even there for that one. But then we had a follow up, and I told her, "Hey, this was going to be the next week's topic." After she shared a story that she shared before, but it's all in a positive environment, and everybody's supportive here, and it's just about growing together. So I want to make that perfectly clear in case we travel back down that road, but we're here to balance each other out, so to speak. So tonight's topic is the consequences of expectation. Uh, I think the immediate way to process that is in a negative kind of way. So consequences has that connotation of something not being good. Um, I'm going to push back against that some as we go through this evening. But to begin with, I'll just say the first question will be, have you experienced any consequences associated with expectations? Simple as that. So if you attach expectations to situations, you can experience consequences. Again, I'll say right now, they don't always have to be bad ones, but that's how we generally perceive that notion of consequences, that word consequences. So I'll begin with Lisa. This is something that I think we've discussed for a while. We don't have to recap all of it, and it doesn't have to be about that specific situation, although it can tie into that. And I'll go first before I get to Lisa. But Lisa, you'll be first up. So, having myself experienced negative consequences, but consequences nonetheless, in regards to expectation, I thought back to this moment, um, 2000 and I think it was 12. Um, the first time I graduated from college, it was UNCG. Everybody knows I was an adult student, so I was a grown man, but it was a big deal to me, and I wanted to share it with everyone that I thought was important to that journey. And we had this gathering and family and friends, and I wrote out this long list of toasts and people I wanted to elevate and really show appreciation of during that moment. And I was going down the list, and I got to my aunt, who I love dearly, and she wasn't there. I said, "Where is she?" Because she was at my graduation, and she was at the other little part of the graduation. So where is she? Um, she had left to handle another task that took her out of town, and I was bothered by that. But she didn't know I was doing what I was doing. I just expected her to be in attendance, just like everyone else. But she had left, and she took her sister, my other aunt, with her, and so I'm missing two aunts. And I'm like, I had something I wanted to say to those two wonderful ladies, um, but they were gone. They weren't there, uh, and I was bothered by it because I didn't feel like they were obligated to do what they were doing. I felt like the moment I wanted to share with them during that time was paramount. I felt. You hear that, Lisa? I felt. So, so yeah, my expectation of sharing that time and giving them their flowers was dashed in that moment, and that was a consequence of my expectation. So I began. Um, Lisa, it's your turn. So we'll see where you go with it. And then Jared, and I'm coming to you. Hey, how you doing, Mary Carmen? Glad to see you.
So not fair. Um, but I mean, I love the question. And what is interesting is after I was done with your show last week, someone had tried to reach me while I was doing the show. And I called them back and I said, "Oh, I was doing Felton show. And this is someone who knows you." And it's like, "Oh, well, what was the topic?" So I got into the topic. Then I got into what my responses and reactions were. And oh my gosh, it was amazing that this person was like, "Oh no, you shouldn't expect your kids to love you. You shouldn't expect that's just this not their fault. They're here and da 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 da." And it went. And by the end, I'm looking at my phone. I was like, "What box am I putting this person in now?" So to answer your question, I still and what I left that person with is that I will no longer feel guilty for having an expectation of reciprocity, of care, and even an expression of love, right? It's a lot of people, and I've said this probably not as often on this show as I do with a couple of you in person. It's a lot of people say they love me, but I'm smart enough to know that that's a term that is used more often than is shown. So expectations, I believe in having good expectations. I expect the best and I am prepared for the worst. But even when the worst happens and my heart gets broken, I don't see anything wrong with having a broken heart. And I don't believe in lowering the standard of an expectation when you have people in the inner circle. But I've had great expectations. I gave birth to five beautiful, wonderful children, and I literally expected that they would be born healthy, even though I smoked through five pregnancies. Like, that's nuts. And even this beautiful person that's on this line, I smoked in labor with Jaredin. Yes, it's possible, Julia. I know, right? And I still expected healthy kids. And I got healthy kids. All five of them came home from the hospital with me, even though I was doing something crazy and didn't expect anything other than that. And I am a believer. And as a believer, it is written that what, we should, I don't want to throw too many biblical terms out there, but what it is that we expect is what we're going to get. Right. And then sometimes some monkey wrenches get thrown in the plans. But as I think I said last week, is if you shoot for the moon and miss, you still are amongst the stars. So if I set the goalposts, really low, and I get that, then what does that profit? And with my beautiful son there, my children have accused me of, "Oh my God, you expect too much. We have our own life and da da da." Well, you kind of took advantage of the things that I gave y'all. Like, you should have expected a lot less from a single mother with no support system, but you benefited from it. But anyway, I love them, and I'm not going to lower the expectations that I have from them, from any person that I share my love with. And I think we do need to be purposeful and be more careful about who we're casting our pearls to and expressing our love with, because if my cup is always empty, then you get the hostility, you get the frustration, you get the anger, and that's not right either.
So I'll say before I come to you, Jared, and yeah, I was bothered by my aunts not being at that toast. But Lisa, I'm sure you'll confirm this in your experience also. Through that hurt feeling hardship moment, there's an opportunity to get a stronger confirmation of that love and support that exists, because sometimes you got to go through some level of disappointment, or consequences, unexpected consequences, to realize how strong the relationship actually is. And at points when something is happening that is not intended by the other party. So, Jared, and I hope I made that a good transition for you. You don't have to talk about what that necessarily is. Do you need me to refresh the question for you, or you got it?
I think I got it. The consequences of expectation. Um, yeah, and I've heard my mom say stuff like that. We talk about it often. We're pretty open about it, and I'm sure we'll talk more after this video chat. But as far as my own consequences of expectations that I've experienced, I'd say there's a dichotomy, like two sides of the same coin, and it would go back to the flow chart that I'm sure everybody's seen of why are you worrying about this? Can you help it? If you can, don't worry about it. If you can't, don't worry about it. Um, but with that expectation, sometimes you can expect something and help the outcome, and sometimes you can expect something and have no control over the outcome. And I'd say with the no control, my father is one of those people who, in his 55 years of life, he's never quite gotten the hang of using clocks. So I'd say soccer games, baseball games, award shows. He never couldn't expect him to show up. You could hope, but I couldn't expect it, and there was nothing I could do besides maybe tell him that the award show that started at 7 actually started at 6:30. Um, but that expectation, the consequence for me was constant disappointment until eventually I learned to accept him for who he is and what was probably just undiagnosed childhood ADHD in the 70s. Um, but the other side of that coin, where you can help the outcome, um, is when you expect something of someone and you literally bend the will of the world to get that person to that level. And my mom was one of those people. She, my entire life, as far as like I can remember, has always called me a genius. And I at 2, I was not a genius. At 6, I wasn't. Even still now, definitely not. But she would insist it to teachers who would say, "Let's put them in the Common Core classes." She would insist it to people who decided that that one time I took a test and failed it, that was it for me. That I couldn't get it. She made sure that teachers constantly put pressure on me, that I was constantly studying, that everything in my life revolved around me being an excellent learner. And so she expected me to be a genius and she refused to accept anything else. So she just made sure that I came out smart and successful in school. So yeah, there's that dichotomy where if you can't help it and you expect it, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. But if you can help it and you expect it, then you should put some energy into making sure you control that outcome.
Yeah, I like that analysis, Jared, and I like that a lot. And we're kind of jumping ahead to the next question. So you and your mother both kind of intertwined the what can be learned from the consequences of the consequences you experienced. Uh, Sounds like there was some positive outcomes to a degree, much like I shared in terms of the toast that was missed by my aunts. There was the later confirmation, strong confirmation of how much that would not disrupt our relationship, even though it was hurtful at the moment. And you guys have a similar path in terms of the support and encouragement you receive, Jared, and it's unrelenting and not going anywhere coming from your mother. So that's awesome. Um, so I guess we can incorporate that. And when I come to you, Greg and Julia, just think about how you experience any consequences associated with expectations, and also what can be learned from the consequences you experience. But I believe the question must flow together because we've gone like three for three for so far. So you guys have at it. I love the energy thus far.
Beautiful. I'm going to jump in right quick and let Julia have the full say. Yeah. Two things. In the business that we were in, which was the travel business, we really had to manage expectations. We had to be out front of that. We had to manage it day by day, moment by moment. And so that's my experience with managing expectations. It's always been like top of the list. Recognize what's being expected and manage that. Be honest, provide, produce, deliver. And then now I'm going to go like I often do, Felton. I'm going to go into the philosophical. Sorry, brother, but yeah, I equate expectation with another beautiful word, which is imagination. Imagination is our ability as a human being to produce results by imagining them. The beautiful song by John Lennon, Imagine. There is a powerful truth in that. And we are not limited by circumstances. We can imagine a better way.
I'll say before you go, Julia, because you brought up something, I think, Greg, that again ties right into Lisa and Jared, and something I always say is a philosophical adherence is be pessimistic, and when you're pleasantly surprised, be extremely joyful. That's one of my little things I like to have remembered. But I do agree across the board, whether it's imagination or energy that is put towards the outcome you truly desire, as Jared was speaking of. If it's something you can have influence over, then why not? If it's something you can contribute to that, going towards the outcome you desire and expect, then why not do that? So that includes that imagination aspect. Great. Go ahead, Julia.
Yeah, I really appreciated both Lisa's and Jared's open, honest sharing, and with using the imagination and also preparation. I think sometimes we can have expectations that are not realistic. And so being realistic, being honest, knowing who we're working with, knowing our children, knowing our clients, what is reasonable and what can we control? How can we set up this situation for success for them and for the outcome we want without, and it might be manipulating, but in a positive way, but how can we work that? And if we get our feelings hurt or if it doesn't come out the way we want, that's on us. We have to look at, okay, was I realistic in this expectation? Maybe how could I expect them to know, like with your aunt's situation, how could I expect them to know how important this was to me? So some of expectations is kind of self-centered, and it's a great topic. I hated I missed last week. I would have loved to hear Lisa on feelings. That was such a great topic.
Well, we have to go back and watch the replay, Julia.
Yeah, I'll definitely watch it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I shared the story of that graduation primarily. I think it syncs up to a degree with Lisa's birthday story. There are moments that you just expect other people that you really care about to feel the gravity of, to really understand that you want to share this with them. Not that you want it to just be about you, but you want to share this with them. And yeah, my response to Lisa that she hangs over my head when every chance she gets, it was not coming from a place of meanness. It was coming from a place of, stuff happens like that. I may have not had that story on hand for you that day, Lisa, but I definitely can identify with that strong feeling of what, but man, you recover and you move on, and that's when you find out that individual thing, that thing that we're all functioning as individuals first, and we're fortunate when we find others that do share the time, space, and place with us. I'm fortunate to have that here. So thank you all again. Bob, coming to you, man. Do you have both questions, or you want me to read them all?
I'm good. I'm good.
Cool.
I'm good. And I'm going to shift this up a little bit. I think we've used different words Jared invoked the word hope versus expectation. Gregory invoked the word imagination. One of the challenges we have when talking about this sort of thing, I think, is the limitation of language, and where our head goes when any given word is the word that's used. And we've been talking mostly, I think maybe exclusively thus far, about expectations in the terms of our personal expectations for something material or something emotional or something like that. And I'm going to suggest that we need to let go of expectations in terms, using the term around what we are expecting out of anything that we want. And rather be grateful for whatever we may get in that sense. And so, Felton, to your experience, to that situation you're describing, whatever was given to you and shared with you, whatever time was given, I would say have gratitude for that, not have disappointment associated with how it failed an expectation that you had sitting over here. I think that expectations in that sense always set us up for hurt and disappointment and so forth, because nobody else knows what our expectation is. If we set an expectation out, how is somebody supposed to fulfill that? Because how are they supposed to know what that looks like? They're coming in from a different perspective, and it's unfair to hold them to your expectation when they're not a party to that. So,
Bob, quick question, and I want you to keep your train of thought, so don't lose it. Ever planned a surprise birthday party or gathering? That's the notion in that.
One.
Have you? Yeah. Have you ever? Yeah.
I have never really planned one, and on the occasions when I did something with the quote expectation that it would be a surprise, it never has been. So that's my. Now here's where expectation sits for me. I expect people to be courteous, considerate, compassionate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When they're not, I am not hurt. I am not, my feelings aren't hurt. I'm not hurt. I am just disappointed, because I feel like if we can't expect compassion, consideration, respect from the world in which we live these days and the people that exist in that world, then we failed as a society. There's nothing personal in that for me, because I didn't cause these other people to be disrespectful, discourteous, non-compassionate, etc. It just disappoints me that as a culture, that's where we are. When I'm in a parking lot and somebody's walking in the middle of the street where cars can't go, they could be on one side or the other and cars could go on by, but they're just taking up the entire street as if they're the only person that matters in the world. I think that's rude. I think that's inconsiderate. It's certainly self-centered. It's certainly without regard to other people in the world. And I think that's disappointing. I find that disappointing. When I see things like you and I talk about all the time, it's like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? Why are we not? Because we ought to be better than we are. We ought to be, but we are what we are. So for me, that's what expectation, that's the disconnect between expectation and reality, but it's something that we have to look in its face and be honest about, because if we don't, we can't do anything with it. We can live in myth and delusion, or we can face it.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to just say, in terms of personal stuff, you know, a good example for me is when I went to East Africa last summer, and everybody's talking about, what do you expect? What do you expect? What do you expect? And I very specifically didn't expect anything, because I wanted to just go and let it be the way it was going to be. And I think that if we do that, if we just do that, then we can be appreciative of what comes from it, and we can be more attuned to what's actually out there to gain from whatever it is. If we have an expectation, we miss what actually is going on because we're focused on what we're not getting that we thought we wanted or thought we were going to get. And so I think we disappoint ourselves, and we miss what's real about the time or the opportunity.
Yeah, well stated. I definitely share the potential for disappointment when applied to expectations. The level of intimacy associated with, I think, what is being shared by Lisa and myself, or has been shared by Lisa and myself, is what kind of breaks that out. But I totally am on board with the thing that you just mentioned, because you know that's another one of my philosophical leanings. I lower expectations, or have none, on most of what I endeavor upon, most of what I do. That's a Stoic principle. You, as Lisa alluded to earlier, you're ready for the worst and the best. You kind of just have that understanding that both are possible. So I totally apply that to the things outside. But when it comes to that point, not so much that I disassociate the potential for that disappointment with a relative or something at a moment that I want to share with them, that I had prepared each individual person to be highlighted during that toast, because the expectation was that they would continue to share that day with me. It was not one that I implied and even remotely considered a disappointment, as I'm sure Lisa can attest to. You just don't think that that's going to be the case. And when it happens, you would almost be a cyborg if you didn't have some type of you'd be some type of robot if you didn't have some type of reaction. You got something you want to throw in before I go to the next one?
One quick thing, Lisa's comment about expectations about the children. I think that it's foolish to be smoking while delivering Jared and expect him to be healthy. I think it's good to be hopeful that he's going to be healthy. And I like Jared's word of hope versus expectations. I think as parents, we should not expect anything. We should hope and wish and aspire for, and all of that sort of thing. This is where language gets a little bit dicey. Aspirations and expectations are two different things. And so I just wanted to make that distinction.
Yeah. Lisa, go ahead. You can respond. Go ahead.
And I like Bob's point, but I think the word expectation gets assigned when the emotions are so high. So aspirations are a great word, but I think that expectations got assigned. But I don't quite agree with the analysis of when you're going to explore a foreign country or something, you can't have any point of reference to the same as a human condition. Number one, it's like if you invest in stocks, you're expecting some return on your investment. You may prepare for not getting as great a return, but you don't invest in anything without having some level of expectation. And I'm gonna start using the word aspire, because if I've developed this relationship of consistency, I would aspire to wanting, and to a different level. Felton's situation was somewhat of a surprise. Whereas when I talked about my 50th birthday, that was not a surprise. It was not shocking because the invitation was expressed to my children, and my children was full aware of the enormity of what that day meant to me. And I'm still trying to figure out how I exist in this world when it comes to they are my tribe because I participated in getting them here, but to not hang expectations on them, but aspirations that they will receive the level of love, and we can be more of a bonded unit. But that is my expectation of this bonded unit, whereas they're fighting like this, let me go, let me go. And I can understand that too. But it's a tough road to hoe when you talk about human conditions versus tangible things that you can more readily release those things from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we've talked in this space about relationships and people we love and some of the disappointment that can spur from that. That's an ongoing thing. There's always going to be a potential that you're letting somebody down. And it could be somebody you care about, but you cannot be conscious of it. And yes, absolutely. My aunts didn't know that I was planning on doing this great toast, but everything that tracks through your mind when that situation went, at least you could have came and said bye. I could have made sure but they were gone. So that's an instantaneous, high, emotional, good moment that turns into where the heck are my people that I wanted to make sure I shared this with. So yeah, it can be different when that level of intimacy is something different. Now you guys are talking about kids. I don't have any, so that part is probably a whole different scale that could be a little bit more impactful to your day. This has been great. I'm really enjoying the fact that we're covering stuff that is kind of commingled, and I don't want to rehash, but I'm going to ask this question, even though it's been alluded to and answered in a certain way by most of you, but you can be more specific if you can. So how can we better process or deal with any consequences of expectation? So in other words, when that thing happens that could be negative or positive, don't forget I'm still leaving that out there, but when that consequence occurs, how can we better deal with it? How can we grow from it? How do we process it in a way that becomes more beneficial? Julia, I'm coming to you and Greg first.
Gosh, that's such a good question. Sometimes I'm part Stoic and part Buddhist in that, expectations are something that I work on really not having, so we don't have expectations on our children or grandchildren. We've set up a system where we respond to them, and they know we love them, and we respond accordingly. With my mother, for instance, it's been, the whole thing with birthdays. Birthdays are huge family situations, and we were just talking about birthdays before the show started. And so we started preparing, because we are so involved with some of the community stuff we're doing, and we're in the travel business. We shared with mom and family that, we won't be there. We won't be home every Christmas. Birthdays, but we'll celebrate. We'll call, we'll celebrate, but it might not be on that day. So just trying to work with, my thing has been more trying to work with other people's expectations. And for me, not to have expectations, and aspirations, yes. And I'm like Bob said, I keep wanting to call him Robert, like Bob said too, I think expect the best in people. And that helps them grow and hopefully be kinder, more compassionate. But preparing others to not have expectations of us is part of it.
I don't really know that I can share anything more than that. I sure like the idea of inserting the word aspire, aspiration, into this conversation. In a very casual sense, I come to expect when we come into this space that we're going to experience a certain level of honesty and different points of view and different perspectives. But there's an expectation for what happens on these calls, and it's a beautiful thing. It's not something that's held to a certain order. It's appreciated. So can anticipation and expectation be the same thing? Well, maybe so.
Yeah, it's intentional also. Go ahead, Julie.
I was going to say, in respect, there's such a respect in this space, and that is something that I do have expectations about, and I so appreciate that about this space.
No, I appreciate you guys too. It's intentional. That's a principle of grown folks business. That's a principle of myself. Yeah, if you run into that person Bob is talking about in the parking lot, give them a moment and see if maybe there's something going on that you maybe could be of service. I'm definitely a person that doesn't mind asking people, are you okay? Because sometimes people need that. Sometimes people need that more than you can ever know. I've said that to people and they almost break down crying sometimes. Strangers, but some people just need to be asked, "Are you okay?" And there's nothing wrong with doing it. But then if they show you that they don't want to be bothered or whatever else after that, then at some point you might need to say, "Okay, walk in the middle of the parking lot. Hope you don't get hit." Jared, I'm coming back to you. How can we better process or deal with any consequences of expectation?
Okay, so I heard a lot of good stuff, and I wanted to jump in at a lot of points, but I respect that we have an hour. Um, so okay, I'm going to go out there and bring something that I read in 2015, which was that USA Today ranked Greensboro, North Carolina, the 5th best city to drive in North America. Which some people are surprised by that. They're like, Greensboro, no, not with the traffic, not with that exit out there, Martin Luther King on 29, like not with Wendover at 5 p.m. But when I got the chance to drive in Charlotte for the first time, I realized how much I expected people to let me over on the highway, and how much I expected people to go when they saw a green light, and how much I expected people to slow down when they saw a yellow light. And how often I did not hear a horn. I almost never hear a horn in Greensboro. In Charlotte, it's like constant. It's like people can't drive without hitting that thing. So that expectation, like we have, I think, established here that there's no half expectation. If you can't fully expect it, then you're hoping, you're aspiring. But if you fully expect it, it's like a part of your worldview. Like, the world has to do this. People will let me over. They will get over in parking lots. People will say, "Hi, how are you?" when you get up to the register. The sun will rise. The moon has phases. These are expectations. It's a part of the world. I expect my mother to attend every important event in my life as much as I expect tomorrow's forecast to be correct in the weather app. So that's a big commitment. You're committing your worldview when you expect, and so it hurts a lot when your expectations don't pan out, because you're not just losing your loved one's attendance. You're now questioning, well, did they love me as much as I thought they did? Did they care for me as much as I thought they did? Can I rely on them in these upcoming weeks if something happens? So it's not just losing a moment, it's losing a lot. It's having to rethink a lot. It's having to rock your own world. So when expectations don't pan out, that which seems like the most painful consequence, it's important to reassess and not, I guess, be fooled again by your own expectations.
Good observation. And wonderful points. Yeah, Greensboro, awesome place to drive, man. Love it. I can get almost anywhere in 15 minutes. I've been a lot of places, Jared, and Greensboro is one of the best places to be, even if it's packed on Wendover. It's still very much moving. I've been places where you can be 5 minutes from an exit and can't get off. Go ahead, Greg.
Can I jump in for just a second?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Jordan, how old are you?
I just turned 23.
Will you please take care of yourself and protect yourself? You are loved. You are thought of highly, and you are the future.
Thank you.
Please don't doubt that.
Some positive affirmations for you there, Jared. The parking thing, yeah. I'll put that in the realm. What was that thing? The secret that time you can expect to find a parking space. That was funny. And I think it works sometimes because I do it. But anyway, Lisa, I'm going to let you go, and then I'm going to Bob, and I'm going to get us out of here with the last question, which I think is a good one. So, how can we better process a deal with any consequences of expectation?
So I believe in healing because I have often had unrealistic expectations. But within the context of that, the person accepting who I am and knowing the enormity of my position, my station in my children's lives, because I'm always going to talk about my children. I don't have as much for other people because I'm constantly thinking about how can I be the most authentic representative for them to be good citizens of this world. So when I had that conversation with the other person last week, I said, I think it would be hypocritical for me not to have, and I did use the word expectation last week, but I'm going to pick up Bob's word, for me to not have expectations that my children would express love in a manner at which I can receive it. Because once they get let loose out in the world, and then if they haven't learned how to healthily express and receive love at home, what's going to happen in the world? And that is all of them are adults now. Hallelujah. Everybody's an adult, but I still have to manage in a healthy way. That experience, me turning 50, it did, to your point, Felton, that level of pain that I felt because of my own expectations of them feeling the enormity of how much me arriving at 50 meant to me. It was unreasonable because they had not experienced what I'd experienced. I'd experienced so much loss with people's lives, with healthiness, and with all kinds of things that I treasure existing in the circle with my children. So Jared can even attest that if I can't reach them, or if it's too long and I don't see them, I'll go find them. But they don't know that level of loss. So he speaks from a place of privilege that there's nothing that they're going to experience that I'm not going to just stop living, stop everything else in the world to go and do. So it was unreasonable for me to expect them to put the same level of value on their sharing just that momentous occasion. But I go back to how do you deal with those things? Is I had to reach a level of healing that I still have aspirations that my 5 human beings will be good people. And I just believe in human interaction and engagement and pouring into people and saying you're great. And even when the world knocks you down and all these beautiful things, because there's too many other things out here, which comes from my place of neglect, abandonment, that will continually knock you down. So I'm just constantly trying to heal from those wounds. And I put way too much pressure on 5 human beings that did not know how to even do that. So I had to get a level of healing. And yes, I do still have I'm gonna say expectations because that's the best word when I'm thinking of the definition that I think of when it comes to expectation is a confident belief or a strong hope that something will happen. That I have 3 wonderful strapping sons, and it does not disturb me like it has like it get on my nerves that if I have something physically taxing to do and I have these healthy sons that won't come see about their mama, that pisses me off. Okay. And I don't want to ever lose that, because I think once I, as the authentic representative of their first relationship, start lowering that bar, that, oh, it's okay to not help a 50-plus-year-old woman move a 200-pound box, then what am I giving to the world? Right. Like I don't weep over things like that anymore. I used to, but I've been healed, but I'm still gonna, take them to task. Like, you didn't come over here for 5 months and you knew I had this big tree in the yard. I'm your mama. And I think most mamas go have a point of guilt trip, no matter the level of healing.
If you talking about that big heavy thing you had me lifting, I know, yeah, I know why you dodged that one, Jared, and that thing was ridiculous, bro. But I'll say unreasonable, maybe, Lisa, but understandable is I think the operative word. It's totally understandable for that to occur the way it did and for you to feel the way you felt. But I like that you said you extracted healing from those consequences. You found that you needed to get some self repair, some healing with that consequence. Bob, how can we better process or deal with any consequences of expectation? And I'm going to stay with you after you're done, so I'm go back around space and get a quick answer to the last one.
So back to what I said. I think that what I said earlier. I think we really need to be careful about when we impose expectations, because I think expectations are largely unfair to everyone else. And I think they're largely around what we want out of something, and what we should be better at is showing gratitude for gifts as opposed to showing disappointment for a failure to get what actually would be a gift. So that said, I appreciate very much what Gregory and Julia and Jared brought to the table a few minutes ago in terms of what our experiences tell us to expect, because that talks about consistency and reliability and the value of consistency and reliability. And Julia mentioned coming to this space. Yeah, we have an expectation in this space because we've experienced it. And we have grown accustomed to the consistency and the reliability of respect and trust and openness and vulnerability and so forth and so forth. And so if tomorrow we had this encounter and it was not like that, whoa, time out, what's happened here? Now, what that should trigger is not hurt or disappointment. What that should trigger is, okay, what's going on? I need to understand what's going on. So, why did this happen? And something's bad's happened here because we are accustomed to this, that, or the other thing. Jared, in talking about his mother, we're talking about his dad. He wished for reliability and consistency from his dad. He could either get right with the lack of that, or he could stay in a mode of disappointment. He makes the choice. I get right with that. I understand. It's about him. It's not about me. And I get it. I don't like it. I get it. That's what That's what's reasonable for me to expect. With his mother, he expects this other thing. If that disappoints, the question then becomes, oh, what's wrong? What's happened? It shouldn't be, oh, she let me down and I'm going to just pout about that. It's like, wait a minute, what's wrong here? Because it's not consistent. It's not a part of what I've grown to know and be able to rely on. And so I think the consistency and reliability piece of all this is really, really important when it comes to the matter of expectations. And I think expectations around consistency and reliability are completely fair. And I think they are possibly the most bonding and treasured aspects, really, of our interaction.
Yeah, I think I'll throw in an overarching observation that balancing our expectations is critical. If we have them, balancing. And if you expect anything out of what you're going to endeavor upon or what you are waiting for, the consequences sometimes are just a lesson, whether it's a lesson in healing or a lesson in disassociation with that group of those people. And Bob, I want to throw something else in there before you come back. And then I want to go around and wrap this up. So I want to throw a word in that I know you use that I think is an operative word for this conversation. And that's reciprocity. Damn, if I can say it.
Reciprocity.
Yeah, reciprocity. Reciprocity is critical in some things that you endeavor upon with other people. And I think that warrants some expectation that is outside of some of the picture you're painting, because I know I expect something similar. If I hold the door for you, I kind of expect a thank you, or at least an acknowledgement of that's what's taking place. And that's on a minuscule level. And it's in the same realm of what you say, just out in the world, what you expect from people as far as pleasantries and some consideration and such. But that reciprocity, the word I can't say tonight for whatever reason. Reciprocity is, I believe, kind of ingrained in decent people's interaction with others. Go ahead and incorporate this into the last piece, Bob. Give me an example if you have one. Hold up, Bob. Hold up. Incorporate this into the last thought, because we're gonna get out of here.
Yeah.
And you can respond to the reciprocity. But listen. The consequences of expectation are not always bad. Do you have any examples of good consequential outcomes when expectations were not good? When you didn't have good expectations, but there still was a good outcome? Do you have an example? If you don't, we can keep going. But I know you got more you want to say, so say it.
Yeah, I really don't know how to answer that because of my attitude about expectations, and it's so settled in me for the last number of years that I don't know how to answer that question. The reciprocity thing, though, I think is really important, because that's where a matter of equity, a matter of fairness, matters of come into the equation. And none of us like to be a dirt rug. None of us like to be the skid mat, the boot cleaner. We all think that there is, we're all willing. No, I'm saying, excuse me. No, we're not. A lot of us are willing to wash another person's boots, and we're willing to do that time after time after time. Yet there is a time when we're like, I'm sorry, no, I'm done. I'm done. And that's a matter of reciprocity. That's when you're like, no, I'm sorry, I'm done.
Yeah, can't be a sucker the whole time. Agreed.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Jared and Lisa, Greg and Julia. This is the final question. And I'll give a good example. I believe what is a good example. Sometimes our expectations are to be disappointed, right? If anybody thinks about this whole in a whole sense, sometimes we expect to be disappointed, but then there's sometimes a good outcome. Great example for me is yesterday I did a wonderful presentation in front of some high schoolers on matters of racial equity in the shadow of a trip we took to Alabama, and we went to, among other things, the Lynching Museum, Rosa Parks Museum, Justice Museum. So I thought this was happening next week. I was prepared, but I wasn't fully prepared. But I still did something that they truly appreciate, and I got so much wonderful feedback, including from parents that were just really appreciative of the time I shared with 58 students. I didn't expect it to go as well as it did, but sometimes we get lucky in our expectations, I believe. That's how I mean this question. So let's fly around and get this taken care of. Jared, anytime you had bad expectations and it turned out to be a good situation, good consequences?
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to speak more in general, not get too personal, but you guys can probably fill in the blanks. But I read this great article in the Atlantic by a doctoral candidate at MIT about people with power versus people without power, and like there's a pretty big difference in the behaviors of people with power. People with power expect to get what they want, and so whenever it's in front of them, they grab it. Whenever they don't get it, they demand it. And people without power expect to not get what they want. So if you would put something that they needed in front of them, they would immediately assume it's not for them. Um, they wouldn't go after what they want. And I'm going to connect this to one more thing, then bring it all around. But there's also this pay gap with women, where women aren't paid as much as men, and there is expectation instilled in men, me as a man, that I should be a breadwinner, I should be making as much money as possible. And there's this expectation instilled in women that they shouldn't fight for what they want. They shouldn't get too aggressive, especially black women are discouraged from wanting too much and going after too much. And so society can put these expectations in you that you don't deserve what you want, that you do deserve what you want, and it can end up making you narcissistic and like demanding, or it can either make you meek and it can make you resist what you need and what you want. And I've been there, both sides, unfortunately, both sides, kind of back and forth in the past 2 years. And like in the end, when I get what I want, when I get what I need, it grounds me. It makes me feel like a good, worthy person. Or when my friends slap me over the head and tell me that I'm wanting too much, I'm demanding too much, I'm again grounded and made a more healthy person because my worldview is brought back centered.
I love this space for how we just paint outside the lines, but it all makes beautiful art. Jared, and great share, and come back, man. Come back more often. I enjoy your energy and your presence. Lisa, anytime you had bad expectations and they were met with good consequences, unexpected.
I have to say, I never expected anything bad. I don't know why. Um, I, I I will attribute it to not having a healthy self esteem. I often tell people that one benefit of childhood neglect is that no one ever told me I couldn't, I wasn't, yada, yada, yada. They didn't tell me anything. So I've tried a boatload of businesses, even when I only had a GED. I just be like, oh, well, I need to make some money. So let me do such and so. Um, and even partners, relationships, like, okay, that seems like, I don't know. I don't have the negative expectations, even when something seems outside of the scope of what should be possible. So I filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy once. And 10 months after it was discharged, I applied for and got a mortgage from a good credit union. Um, so even I don't know what that is other than attributing it to having, and I'm not a narcissistic, but a healthy self-esteem. And to Jared's point, oh my gosh, I see that really often. People who are in a certain space that doesn't think that there's something for them. And you guys know that I'm out here in the community trying to connect people to some resources, and the energy, people don't have to say it with their mouth. It's that the energy, like something is right here. Like even when I give that example of, well, I filed a Chapter 7 and in 10 months I got a mortgage. So if I can, you can too. It's kind of like, yeah, no, I believe it for you, but not for me. So I don't know what that other thing is. So I have to go ahead to Greg and Julia on that one.
All good. Greg and Julia, take us home. Thank you again for sharing that. Another good instance of we make beautiful art. Go ahead, Greg and Julia.
Well, I don't know about taking us home because you all have taken us to church. Okay. Jared, we hold you in our thoughts. You are the future, and not putting too much pressure on you. You know what you're capable of. Now, speaking of reciprocity, there's a certain binding in that word. And I tend to go towards the freedom aspect. Reciprocity is not a free enterprise. If we're sensing that that reciprocity is like a natural law or something that has to happen, I say no. Reciprocity is not a natural law. That giving is free, and there is freedom from that. Don't feel binding to the idea of reciprocity. That when an investment is made into the goodness of another, there is no debt.
Yeah, and I guess he speaks to so much of what we do with giving food or helping others, that we just have no sense of, which is different, of reciprocity. Gosh, yeah. So situations where we had maybe negative expectations that turned out good. Recently, I think it's too much to share in our limited time, but this has been a fantastic conversation. I agree. There's so much with what Jared said about people putting that have low expectations of themselves. They don't expect that they're going to get, so they don't have the confidence. They don't present themselves. That is systemic, and that's something I think that needs to change. Black women. Anyway, there's work to be done in that area with expectations. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you, Felton. We love everybody in the squares.
Absolutely. I definitely appreciate you all as well. This is always an amazing experience. The reciprocity thing is worthy of our full attention. I will say I'm totally in agreement. You do nothing with an expectation of the return of something. Always say if you do something, make sure you're doing it because you want to, not because you expect something in return. The type of reciprocity that I'm applying, and I think that Bob would agree, is the more genuine. Greg and Julia, we are definitely in that realm of reciprocity when we interact. It's not material or tangible. It is a soulful exchange. It's a consideration of one another that's in that realm of reciprocity. I think I spoke for you, Bob, on that one. I think we all have had a wonderful, I'm getting goosebumps. It's been a wonderful night, and we went a little bit over. Danya, I appreciate you hanging on and hanging out. Hey, you guys do a lot for me in this space, and I hope to always be available in some way, shape, form, or manner to each and every one of you, and vice versa. All love. Y'all take care. Have a wonderful night. Enjoy
Thank you, Danya.
the weekend. Y'all take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.